Hello, and welcome to FACT's webinar, Getting Started with Turkeys. I'm Samantha Gasson, FACT's Humane Farming Program Manager, and I will be moderating this session. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we dive right in, let me take a minute or two to do a few quick introductions. Food Animal Concerns Trust, or FACT, is a national nonprofit organization headquartered in Illinois that works to ensure that all food-producing animals are raised in a humane and healthy manner. We accomplish this by supporting humane farmers through our Humane Farming Program, promoting policies that make foods from animals safe and healthy to eat through our Safe and Healthy Foods program, and generally help consumers make informed food choices. Please visit our website at foodanimalconcerns.trust.org to learn more about our farmer services. I am going to go ahead and turn it over to my wonderful colleague, Katie Mead, and she will take it from here because I'm doing double duty today, and I'm also going to be a panelist. So but please answer the poll, and I'm going to turn it over to Katie. Thank you, Katie. Katie, you're on mute.
Let me start over. Hi, everybody. So I'll be introducing the four panelists. We're starting off with Ben Grimes. He's a city kid turned farmer. He raises thousands of birds every year on his farm in central North Carolina. Over the years, he's made epic mistakes and learned some things. Ben has also been a mentor with FACT 3 years in a row. Next up, we have Shay Peshek and Anna Hankins. They run Over the Moon. It's a direct-to-consumer farm business located in rural Delaware County, Iowa, owned by Shay and Anna. They produce pasture-raised chicken, turkey, and duck, farrow to finish Berkshire pork, and seasonal cut flowers. Anna has been both a mentee and a mentor with our FACT mentorship program, so we're really happy to have her. And she's also been a mentee with Ben Grimes, so that's really great. Next up is Isaiah and Whitney, first generation farmers of Rocky Run Farm in, I'm going to say it wrong, Mebane, North Carolina.
Honey, it's the South. It's Mebane.
Mebane, North Carolina. They grow produce, cut flowers, perennial fruits, and raise chicken, duck, turkey, and sheep for meat. They strive to grow their farm business slow and steady in a way that's sustainable for the business and their family. And last up is our wonderful Samantha Gasson, who you all know very well, I'm sure. She owns, along with working for FACT, she owns a diversified livestock farm in Piedmont, North Carolina with her family, and she raises all things, including turkeys. So that wraps up with, we're really lucky to have these turkey farmers and share their experience. So we're going to move on to questions. And just a reminder, instead of popping any questions you have in the chat, please put them in the Q&A, and I will do my best to address them in real time if they make sense, or we'll revisit it at the end. So
I've shared the results to the poll. So if that's if everybody, that sort of gives you an idea of where everybody is. So it looks like 62% of the people attending are not currently raising turkeys, which is great because this is getting started with turkeys, and 38% are currently. And about 25% would like to increase the number of turkeys they raise. 8% are having trouble making their existing turkey operation profitable, and 58% are exploring turkeys as an option for their farm offerings, and 13% have none of those. So maybe you can write in the chat what it is you're interested in. All right, there you go. Sorry, Katie.
No problem. All right, so we'll start off with the basics. So I'm gonna kind of, when do you order your birds in preparation, and how much land are they on? Let's go ahead and start with Anna.
Sure. So we raise broad-breasted whites, and that's all we've tried so far in the past 3 years of raising birds. When we order them has varied a little bit depending on when we want to get them processed. So typically we definitely want to have them on the farm by July in order to have that Thanksgiving market met. But this past year we did them a little bit earlier so that we could take them to the processor earlier in the fall. So we did them in April and May. And we have our birds on about, they're rotating through about 10 acres.
Great. Whitney and Isaiah?
We also raised the broad-breasted whites. We've actually only raised that type of bird since 2019 is when we got our first batch of birds. In 2023 was our first year doing year-round, and so we're going to continue to do year-round this year. So we actually have turkeys now. They're
Brooder.
a week old. Yeah, they're in the brooder, and so that's the earliest that I think it was the earliest we could get the birds. We'll get another round in the summer, as well as July to try to hit the Thanksgiving market. And we'll do another batch in December. So we'll get whatever I forgot what that timing is, August, I think, for that process. And we own, and our farm is 20 acres. And the turkeys are probably on 4 or 5 throughout the year, rotating.
Great. Thanks. Ben, how about you?
Hey everyone. Let's see. So it varies a little bit year to year. I have bought started pullets in the past. I have generally brooded my own, and I've started them both like the end of July to try to get fresh turkeys for Thanksgiving. And I've learned over time that fresh turkeys at Thanksgiving is madness, at least in my production style. So I don't do it anymore. So now I really like to have the turkeys like finished in the freezer. And last year I did it. It was like late October, November. I may push it up this year and do like late September, October in the freezer, which would put me at like beginning of late kind of May, June area. And I like to do it depends each year. Like this year I raised about 600 turkeys or finished 600 turkeys, and they were probably on about 4-ish acres, I would say, over the course of the 3-ish months on pasture.
Great. Samantha.
So yeah, we're different than everybody else because we're not doing the whites because I think they're ugly and I don't want to look at them. So we do the bronze broad-breasted, and then we also do some heritage birds. We do the Spanish blacks, and the reason why we started doing them was just because customers were asking us for them, and it gives us the opportunity to have a wider range of sizes. We charge a little bit more for them, so that sort of covers them being, with us for about a month longer. We order our birds, we're like Whitney, we're going to have some coming in 2 weeks, and then we'll do 4 different batches. And this year, we're going to do 3 batches this year of 200 each. And then we also raise year round. And so it's not raised year round. We sell our cuts year round. So we do frozen and we don't do any fresh, because I think doing fresh, like Ben said, is insanity. And I watched Ben do it and I was like, there's no way I'm ever doing that. That's insane. So I like to have everything organized. I like to know exactly what sizes I have. I feel like it makes it easier for me to market. It's easier for me to organize. It's just so much easier. So, and the land, we put ours in the past, they've been sort of rotating around, because we also do the broilers as well. So they all sort of share it's about a 20-acre front pasture that we have that they're using. Maybe last year and the year before, they probably used about 2 acres of that, but they moved to a different spot each year. So we have a total of 20 that they can get moved around in. And that's not in the woods, because I don't really want them in the woods. I'm worried about predation in the woods.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. You want to move to our next slide? Cool. So we're going to move on to management, and I have some questions popping up about management, so I'll address those. I'll add that. So we want to know how many birds you raise in a group, how many groups in a year, how often you're moving your groups, your fencing styles, maybe even at different phases, and then what does your housing look like? And then a couple of questions that popped up that if you want to, I can put them in as well, is the tom to hens ratio, if that's an issue, and then integrating them with other grazing animals. Does anybody want to start with this one? The kind of broader management?
I'd be happy to.
Great, thanks.
So I keep my turkeys in the brooder. I like to keep them in the brooder a good long time until they're really, really ready to go out. About 4 weeks. And then I don't raise them in any shelters. I use the Premier One electric netting. I keep them in that. And there's a lot of nuance there about how to keep them in the net. Like when they're young, I use poultry crates and I put them around the edges so that they can't run out. And then they train to not run through the net when they get older because they tend to barrel through the nets. As I said, I don't use any shelters out in the field. I just make sure that they have access to trees. And so there's always access to trees. Like I have a lot of trees around my pasture, so I'll put a net around trees so that they have access to shade and shelter. But once they're 4 or 5 weeks old, they're pretty much bulletproof. And it would be really cumbersome to have enough shelters on my small piece of land to be able to manage that many turkeys. So we just let them in the trees and they've always done very well. Also, that's another reason to finish before Thanksgiving because sometimes weather in around Thanksgiving can get kind of dicey. And then for feeders, like I use both their big cool KUHL feeders. Those are really great, as well as I use troughs. And then I just, move them around from paddock to paddock. So you have to have enough nets. I don't have any way to contain them. So I have to have enough nets to basically break down or set up an entire new net and then move all the shelters and waters over and then let the turkeys follow into the grass. And they love to graze. So they are always super eager to go into a new paddock and graze and find whatever they want. One thing I do with all my birds is I use waterers on float valves. What I use for all the birds are Kane waters, Kane. I found them on Premier One. They're wonderful. And then the turkeys always have access to fresh, clean water. I don't ever have to worry about the waters filling out or spend time filling waters. I think that's a huge time saver. But yeah, I think that in general, turkeys are really big and they go through a lot of food, they go through a lot of water, and they are bullies to one another. So you need to have a lot of space for food and water and shade. So if you do use shelters, you got to have a lot of space for shelters. And I think that turkeys that do manage differently than all the other birds. Yeah, curious to hear what other people do.
We can jump in. When we first started raising turkeys, it was 2019. We started with just 25 Thanksgiving birds, and every year, the next year we went to 50 Thanksgiving birds, 75 Thanksgiving birds, 100 Thanksgiving birds, and then last year we did year round. So those were our batches, was in these 25, 50, 75, 100. And when we started to do year round, we had two batches in the year at 50 size, and then one at 100. And then, so that was our groups there. And I think Isaiah's going to say more about the rest of it.
Yeah. So, pretty much doubled every year, 200 last year. And then we've got more planned for this year. We've got, like a 5-acre pasture in the back and we've got 4 paddocks that are a ½ acre each that our sheep move through. And they've got cattle fencing. And we've actually started moving our turkeys following the sheep in those paddocks. And then if we need to, we also have electric net fencing that will move them out to the other non-paddocked part of the pasture.
Usually when they're smaller.
Yep. And then so that's it for fencing. As far as their housing, we've got some hoop coops that we made with cattle panels and tarps and 2x6 or 2x4 frames at the bottom. And sometimes when they leave the brooder and go right in there, if they're still small, we'll put them in a hoop coop for an extra week or two, just until they get a little bit larger before we let them just free range. And then we also built a like roosting structure. It was like a 10 by 12 frame of 2 by 6, and then I cut 2 by 6s at a 45-degree angle on both sides, so it comes up like a pyramid. And there's 2 by 6s from the top all the way down, and we've thrown a market tent over top of that, and that's pretty interesting. They love it. Yeah, you could see 75 turkeys on there. They absolutely crowd it and enjoy hanging out on there. Other than that, feeders, when they get large, we do trough feeders, but when they get, more than halfway grown, I'll do a 55-gallon food grade barrel that I've cut holes at the bottom and put a stainless steel tray underneath that, and essentially just made like a 200-pound feeder, just like the smaller versions, but with a $20 barrel.
I want to mention one thing about our fence is a permanent fence. It's a, I think they call it goat fencing, where it's 4x4 squares, not the cattle with the larger squares. So they, even at a, I don't know, 5 weeks or so, when they're really out free range and they can't get through. And it seems to be tall enough that every once in a while we'll have some that like to roost on the fence line. But generally, we rarely have any get out to jump over the fence. So it's not a deer fence by any means, but just a goat fence with a little high tensile around it.
And the broad-breasted whites have a tendency to get towards the end large enough to where they don't really want to jump on top of that fence.
They're
with it being 4 feet tall.
Yeah. And the houses, we don't close them up at night like we would chickens. They're just able to go in the house whenever they feel like it, once they get to a certain size, and to make sure they're not any predator issues. But once they get to a certain age, and honestly, most of them just sleep in the grass too. So
I'll add to the management. We do things pretty similar to Ben in terms of fencing. In terms of the size of groups, we started with 40 the first year, then we did 100, and then last year 200. And I would say the only thing that's of note that we do differently is we've been using just old, found at auctions or on marketplace truck toppers for shelters. Primarily the turkeys end up roosting on them, but in the instance that we have a large rainstorm, it's really nice to have them out there, and they're very cheap. And we've learned some lessons that in the Iowa prairie wind, anything with a tarp is going to fly to the next county for us. And so having something that's heavy and sturdy and cheap that you don't have to build yourself has worked really well for us for turkeys.
That's funny, Anna. We don't have winds like that. That's that's probably why you guys get tornadoes and we don't. But I actually do a combination of what everybody's doing. So I actually do make sure that my turkeys have a space to roost, because that prevents them from, and we do, it's just ground level. It's we just put extra 2x4s on edge as part of our structure. So it's nothing they can get. They only get a little bit off the ground, and they will use that right up till the end, but it stops them from wanting to get on top of the houses. And we do something very similar to what Whitney and Isaiah are doing, is we have cattle panels and we have a tarp over cattle panels, and they're pretty light. You can just move them on your own. So they would not work for Anna. But we have multiples of those. And so we set up a large area with our electric fencing, and then and that only gets moved once a week. And then we move the housing within that section of fencing, and the food and the water within that section of fencing, because they do tend to congregate around the food and the water, and of course at night under the shelter. So we're not having to move them every day, but then we're still getting that benefit of moving them, because we can move the stuff that's easier to move, because the fencing can be a huge pain in the butt. And ours are actually, they're not necessarily following anything, but they are in the same pasture as our ruminants. And so our ruminants can walk, and we've had this happen actually, unfortunately. We've had calves that are excited and will jump in with the turkeys, and they only do it once, and then they get a little too big at some point. But so that can be a problem, but because it's electrified, the adults stay away from it, and so it works out pretty well. And then we do this year, we've always done 100 in a group, and we started slowly as well, just like Anna and Whitney did. We sort of, as we got a little bit more comfortable raising them, we added a few more birds. But this year we're doing 3 batches of 200. And with, as far as the brooder goes, I try and get them out of the brooder as quickly as I can. And it depends on what time of year it is. So this first batch will probably stay in the brooder for four weeks, just because they're pretty delicate up until that 4-week mark. And then when you get to that 4-week mark, and like Ben said, they are bulletproof. You really, I mean, you can run them over and they'll be fine. Well, don't do it, but you could potentially, and it would be okay. But we try, like, as it gets warmer, because we've got those houses, we can actually run heat lamps out. And so we'll take them out as early as a week from the brooder, because we're always trying to make space for more birds, because we've got so many birds coming through when we get into the summer, and we're warm enough that we can do that. And so and we can confine them to their structure, and we use we don't I like Ben's idea of using the crates to go around the Premier One fencing, but we use it's this garden stuff. I think it's for rabbits or something. At some points, at some time, we got this huge roll of it, and we just put that in. So it's this green plastic, really, really tight netting, and they can't get out of it. And we'll make that a really small area for them until they get used to where their food and water is. We'll put a heat lamp in there in the summer for nighttime, and that it's so much better for them to get out on pasture as quickly as possible, just because of air quality. And we have very little mortality in our brooder, or when we put them out like that. It's most of our mortality comes from predators when they're a little bit younger like that. So that's what we do. And there was a question about the toms, how many toms to hens. We don't have, it doesn't really matter for us with our bronze broad-breasted, but when we get into the blacks, because you keep them for longer, the toms will, they can damage the sides of the hens. So we separate our toms from our hens for our heritage breeds. And so we'll process our toms a week before we'll process our hens.
Yeah, we also had a couple questions about rations and natural feeds. Just before we move on, does anybody quickly want to talk? So natural feeds while growing the turkeys out, or is it all bag feeds? Does anybody want to make a comment about with their feed stuffs?
Well, like Ben
Sorry.
said, turkeys, they forage a lot. So I would say like having them on pasture means that they're getting a pretty good combination of everything that they're munching on, in addition to the grain that they're getting at our farm, at least.
Yeah, what do you mean by natural feed? Like what they're
Like
Like
foraging?
bugs and stuff.
I'm assuming that's what she means. Perhaps, Jennifer, if you want to expand on that in the chat or in the Q&A, if you're specific. And my assumption was more along the foraging, so that's great.
Maybe
Yes,
while she's answering that, I think that everyone here is commercial scale, and so while they may forage a lot, and you certainly want to create an environment where they're going to be foraging, and that's part of the whole holistic model, but I'm not relying on that for any significant thing. They have a free choice, fully complete, nutritionally complete ration. I use for Trails ration, I just take it off their website and I give it directly to the feed mill and they mill it for me, and it's great. Yeah, I mean, I've planted all sorts of fun trees out there, persimmons and crab apples, hackberries. Things are gonna start fruiting in the fall. So in their turkey size, because I have a specific turkey pasture that I like to use. But again, that's for me. That's fun, and I don't expect to quantify that in any significant way.
I think it's really important to keep in mind that turkeys have a really high protein and fat requirement. They're not like a broiler or a layer, and feeding them the right ration is important. They can get a lot from their pasture. Like I've seen my turkeys, it's really gross. They'll like rip apart a frog and eat a frog. Anything that gets into their area is dead. I mean, they would eat us if they could, for sure. But so, they're getting a lot from their pasture, but they're not getting enough. And it would be really hard to rely on that. I think if you're doing it for fun and they're just some pet turkeys you've got in your yard, that's fine. But I want to make money. And so I have to be very deliberate about what I'm putting into those turkeys, because I know what I want to get out of them.
Yeah, and we you know, they get a lot from foraging as well, just like everybody else had said. But we have a non-GMO kind of whole grain feed that's milled locally. And one of the things we did last year with a lot of our birds was we started fermenting our feed about once a week. It was a lot to do, but I just wanted to see how it would work with, you know, helping the birds stay hydrated in the heat of the summer, and you know, just for you know, kind of a natural probiotic. So once a week, we'll ferment their feed for 24 to 36 hours before we feed it to them.
What do you mean by ferment, Isaiah?
We hydrate the feed equal by volume the day before and let it sit. And, you know, it starts to sour a little bit.
Mhm.
And then we'll feed it to them the next day, almost like a porridge. They absolutely love it. And the chickens love it too. But and the ducks, one of the reasons we did it was for our ducks, because they're so wasteful with their feed sometimes. By wetting it and making it more of a porridge, we get a lot less waste for our ducks. But
And digestion.
but yeah,
Digestion.
we did it for
Mhm.
digestion
Mhm.
and water retention primarily. We'll
So
probably
did you
do it
know,
again
did
this
you
year.
notice a difference with the turkeys? Did they gain weight faster? Or was there any, or did it just make you feel good?
It made me feel good. I mean, we're gonna do it again. To pay attention
That's
to it.
legitimate. That's legitimate.
It's hard to know. I mean, I don't know how you guys figure out your sizes, but we go out there and catch them and weigh them. So
Hand
we'd
them to
have
her
to
and she
do
gets on a
some-
scale.
Get on a scale and hold one. Okay, you know, do the math. So that would be a lot of data, you know, record keeping to see if it, maybe over the years we can see a difference, but one batch was kind of tricky.
I know in
Practically,
dry summer-
how did you ferment that much feed and then distribute it like in a practical sense? Because
That's
that's always been a
probably-
barrier to me to fermentation on a big scale.
Yeah, that's I mean, that's the
Exactly.
thing that's the hardest to do, is to haul it all. But I just mix it. We bought a cement mixer specifically for that. And so I'll dump 50 pounds in there, mix it with the same amount of water, and then tip it into 5-gallon buckets and then haul the buckets over. So I'm not actually mixing with a shovel, but it's still a lot to move that much weight from point A to point B.
We've got some ideas we're going to try this year. And I see one of the comments, it's more of a comment that they say they ferment too. And one of our motivations was to see if we could get our feed bill cut. But I think we would have to do it more and find a more efficient way to make it happen. So doing it either more days a week or every day a week to really see a significant cost. But this last year, we just were dabbling and seeing if we could do it.
Yeah, if we had to do it every day, we would have to figure out a way to move it from where we mix it to their feeders, because it's a lot of weight.
I just wanted to note, because I think Sam answered a question a little bit that was in the chat about mixing turkeys with laying hens, when she talked about turkeys tearing apart frogs and that they would eat us if they could. You know, we've definitely learned some lessons about especially having large quantities of turkeys, even in proximity to other birds. They do have the ability to eat other creatures without much of a problem. So that's definitely something to note.
I think that, so we actually have one laying hen. She's a Dominique. And every time we put out a batch of, she's older, she's like at this point probably 7 or 8. Every time we put out a batch of turkeys, she jumps in with them and then she lives with them. And so she grows up with them. And then when we process that group, she jumps over into the next group. She does it every single year. She's done it since 2015. Well, maybe not 2015, because I don't think she's quite that old, but still, she's done it for years and years and years. And it's the funniest thing. I don't know why she does it, but she hasn't been eaten, but maybe it's because she just goes in there. But I wouldn't put them in there because of blackleg. And I know Ben, do you want to talk about blackleg? Because I know you've had issues with that in the past.
Yeah, so turkeys are susceptible to a lot of diseases that other livestock that developed in Eurasia are not. And one of those is blackhead. And blackhead is a disease that will, or virus, I'm not sure what the specific scientific definition is, but it's something that will kill, in my experience, it killed like 85% of my turkeys in 2018. And like Sam, like I don't do layer hens for sale, but I have some for my own use. And what happened is in the brooder that I was using in 2018, before I put the turkeys in there, there were some older layer hens, and layer hens are carriers of blackhead, but they don't get sick from it. And so they were in my brooder just roosting in there, and it's carried in the feces. And so the turkeys in the brooder got exposed to the blackhead virus, and then they started dying off around 4 weeks, and it was absolutely horrific. So it's not something that you want to expose your birds to needlessly. Now, there are a lot of people in the homestead movement or even in commercial farming who will say, fresh air and green grass is all they're going to need, and that's fine. But if you've ever had a blackhead infection, you're going to want to do everything you can to prevent it. And so I don't have layer hens, and broilers are not a concern because I think the birds have to be like 4 to 5 months old to be able to be carriers. But it's still, I don't even put broilers in the same field as my turkeys. And I certainly don't put my little flock of layer hens in that field. It's pretty much just the cows and the turkeys is all that I put in that field. So it is something to be considered about, is that turkeys are susceptible to diseases. So if you do commingle, think about that. On a homestead scale, that's a different conversation. You may want to have a mingled flock and then just breed resistance into your flock. But on a commercial scale, like all of us here, we're all doing batches. And so biosecurity is something we really need to think about for the profitability of our farm. Because if we start bringing in things, we start commingling flocks like that, then it can really be something disastrous. I did see a comment come in about cayenne mixed in. I have heard that as well. I'm part of APA, American Pasture Poultry Producers Association. Sam and I were at the conference in January, and people there were talking about cayenne in the feed, and they said it's absolutely incredible. I haven't tried it, but I have heard that it works very, very well to prevent and even treat blackhead.
So what kind of rates are you talking about?
For the cayenne?
Mm-hmm. Like just
I
commercial, you just buy
don't-
it from from the American Spice or something?
I didn't do it. So at the conference they were talking about doing it, and I don't remember. If you guys want to look into that, Fertrell is an absolutely amazing resource for anything feed related. And that's FERTRELL. They're kind of the name in the game for poultry nutrition and animal nutrition in general. They probably have something on their website, or you can reach out to them directly. They have incredible customer service, and they'd be happy to share that with you. Or if you are members of APA, which I highly recommend, then you can ask on the chat in their email listserv, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'll second joining APA. I think it's like, I don't know, $50 or $100 a year, and it is really worth it. You get so much information. I mean, just, and it's not all scales. So like you may have somebody who's got, 10,000 layers piping in at the same time that somebody's got 25 layers. It's just a really interesting group of people. Can we move on, Katie, or was there another question? You're on mute, hon.
That's it for management, and we can wrap up some at the end. There's still some coming in, but we can move on because we're starting to get into production and processing questions. Perfect. So yeah, how do you process your birds? The age when you process. For the birds you offer for Thanksgiving, are you doing fresh or frozen? And are you offering cuts year round?
I can start.
I'll go first because no one. Oh, well, you go first.
No, Samantha, you go first. You go first. Okay. So we take our turkeys to a USDA inspected processor. It's located about 2.5 hours from our farm. So it is a pretty big haul there and back, and then there again to pick up the birds. We have the processor freeze them in their just large commercial freezer. So that takes away some of the pressure of one, picking them up, and also similarly to what everyone has said, we definitely do not want to sell fresh turkeys. And we get, I would say 80% of the turkeys processed as whole birds, and then we do probably around 20% of the birds processed as cuts, so boneless breasts and wings and thighs, and we save the backs for stock making, which we haven't figured out, but are stockpiling them. And they do a really good job, and that has worked for us, especially just because of what the regulations are within the state of Iowa and how we sell the birds. We take them between 16 and 18 weeks. It's not something that we have got down pat, based on just our own scheduling and the processor's scheduling. So this year we had one group of birds that was way too big, but they did just fine. We had large turkeys. And we are selling the cuts year round. I would say that this is our second year of offering cuts year round. And it's worked out pretty well, and I think it's something that we will continue doing. Now you should go, Samantha.
I lost my mouse there for a second. I couldn't find my mouse to get the mute. So we for our bronze bar breasted, they take a little bit longer, so it's more like 18, 19. And what we like to do is the birds that I know I'm going to cut up, I'm going to do cuts with, I let them go a little bit longer, and then I'll do some that are also a little bit smaller. We sell about half the birds that we raise as cuts, and we also make turkey sausage, so we'll do it sausage as well. And yeah, we do all of ours frozen because it's insane not to, and we process on farm. So we'll start processing in September and October, and then we're totally done by the beginning of November, because I want to make sure I've got all of my sizes and everything before I start advertising and assigning people birds. And that's sort of over the years, and I don't want to be insane. I've done it too many times. Whitney and I have talked about this and complained about this endlessly at market. So we sell at the same farmer's market, and I just don't want to do it. I just, it's self-preservation anymore. We're like just trying to get through Thanksgiving, but we sell a lot of cuts, and I feel like it's really beneficial because you've got people locked in before Thanksgiving into buying birds from you because they've been tasting your birds all year. And it's also, if somebody's like not quite sure if they want to get a turkey from you, you can say, oh, hey, buy some thighs, try them at home, see what you think. And then they've still got time to order. So I think it's really important to do year-round cuts if you can.
So I process on farm, and I don't recommend it, honestly. I started doing it because there aren't any other options. And I think that if you have options, I would seriously look into them. I know there's a lot of people in the pasture poultry movement who are evangelists for processing on farm. If it works in your context, great. But there is a lot of logistics that goes into processing on farm at any significant scale. Sure, you can start off small, but once you start scaling up, it gets really, really complicated, and you're running a processing plant, and you have to have the infrastructure, which is expensive. You have to find the labor. So I really don't recommend it. I'm not doing it because I think it's glorious or the best thing to do, but because I have few options in this area. And so that's why I do it. And so we also process, I like to have all, like Samantha, I like to have all the turkeys in the freezer, so that I can have the weights. And by the time that orders start really picking up in October, I want to know what my weights are so that I can sell exactly what I have. Because, it's always stressful when I did it the week of Thanksgiving, when we process the week of Thanksgiving. You've already got all your reservations. You don't know how many turkeys you've sold. You don't know what sizes you have because they're in the field. You have no way of actually identifying what you have. So when they're in the freezer, you have a really great inventory. It's all in a spreadsheet, and you can say, this is exactly how many I have. And I sell them in ranges. So I sell 14 to 16, 16 to 18, 18 to 20, 20 plus. And that's it. So when people reserve, they're actually buying the full price of the turkey up front. And that actually helps me cash flow things, because turkeys, we need to talk about budgeting. Turkeys are really, really expensive to cash flow. And so having those sizes as we get closer really helps me to be able to know exactly what I can sell, and I can turn off on my website. I can turn off, the 16 to 18 pound range if I'm getting short on those. And I also I always shoot for about 100 to 150 extra turkeys to sell. So once we're done with Thanksgiving, then I'm going to cut up all the rest and package them and sell them as as parts, including ground turkey. In that way, I do it. There is a little bit of sales. I don't sell that much turkey throughout the year. But what it does for me is allow me to capture every single possible sale at Thanksgiving time, because I can always say yes. If a new wholesale customer comes to me and says, "Hey, do you have 50 turkeys?" I can say yes. When all the other farmers around me are sold out, I can still say, "Yes, I have turkeys. I'll take your order." Because there's a lot of last minute people who don't plan, and 2 days before they're like, "Oh, do you have a turkey?" And I can say, "Yes, I do. Sign up here." And so I think that to me is a big reason why I grow extra turkeys. And then I can sell them throughout the year, but because turkeys they take a lot of work to cut up. We can all cut up a chicken like that, but there's a lot of labor and cost involved in cutting up a turkey. So by the time you cut up that turkey and you throw away the back, which weighs about 5 pounds, then you're more or less selling there's not the margin in there to cover the cost of the labor and throwing away the back. So I sell the cuts for the same amount as I would sell a whole turkey, which doesn't justify it. Like with the chicken, I'm going to double my profit on a chicken by cutting it up than I will sell it whole. But I just don't have those margins with turkey. There's a ceiling to what people are willing to pay. So I'd rather, if I could, I would sell every single turkey at Thanksgiving, but I want those extras so that I can capture every single sale. Oh, and I also have a big walk-in freezer. And now I have a big walk-in freezer on farm. I used to rent a freezer, and I use PVC totes, like the big IBC totes. And so I organize them in my freezer. I say, okay, this is a tote of 14 to 16. This is a tote of 16 to 18. And so then I can just pull directly from those totes when I need to. And that really helps to keep things efficient and organized.
The walk-in freezer. We don't have a walk-in freezer. I would say that's
Yet
probably
you
one of
don't
our-
have a walk-in freezer yet.
Yeah,
We'll talk
not
about-
yet.
Yeah, not yet.
So we also do our own processing on farm. I enjoy it. It is a lot of work. I would say one of the biggest issues that we have is finding consistent labor. Oftentimes you have enough, but oftentimes you have somebody back out last minute, and that significantly affects the hours that you work that day. If you don't have solid workforce. The age range when we process is between 14 and 16 weeks. If we process in the 14, it's because they're larger than we had planned. And there's a sweet spot for us. While we want to have all sorts of ranges through the holidays, with some 20 plus, there's a sweet spot that customers in our area want, which is on the lower end of what we as growers would like to do. Like I would say 12 to 14 or 12 to 16 is what most people want. But we want to push that as high as we can while still capturing those sales. And that's difficult. So sometimes we have to break the process into one batch into 2 different processes. And then we offer only frozen. Never had an interest in doing fresh birds just because of the logistics of it. The administrative work on raising turkeys is way more than I thought it was going to be. But keeping track of spreadsheets and making sure that double checking and triple checking that everybody's got what they need is pretty time consuming. we do offer cuts year round. We started that last year. One of the things that we did last year with our holiday birds, which we're going to do from now on, is we do, and one of the reasons is because we don't have a walk-in freezer. We don't have a lot of freezer space, so we really have to be creative with how we manage that. And when we've got holiday birds in our freezers, it's a fine line. But we'll raise another batch of turkeys to process immediately after Thanksgiving, and those birds will be our cuts for the winter. But it's also like a safety net for us, to where if we sell all of our holiday birds, and I mean immediately after Thanksgiving, they're ready to process. So if we oversell, or if we sell all of our holiday birds and we want to open it back up to another 20 or 30 birds, we have that ability to go ahead and process some at 14 weeks and just kind of capture those sales. And that's what we did last year, and that's what we're going to do again.
So don't you want to be done with processing? That's where I am. I'm just done. I'm done with turkeys. I'm done with Thanksgiving. I'm done. I don't want to even look at birds. I want to be totally done. That was my whole goal this year.
Yeah, we ended up processing 4 batches of birds after Thanksgiving: turkeys, 2 chickens, and ducks. But that is mainly because of our freezer constraints. We're not quite, and we can talk about this a little more during challenges, but we've got our biggest hurdle currently is freezers.
And we have 7 giant chest freezers right now.
No, we have 9.
Oh, sorry, we have 9 chest freezers right now, and we might be getting another one.
We're probably gonna end up having
That's the breaking point.
That
around,
is
around double
We're
digits
there.
is when the breaking point for chest freezers and stand-up freezers, when you just say enough and you bite the bullet. It was, for me, it was 11.
Yeah,
And I had a rental space. So it was 11 with the rental space, and I said, enough is enough, I'm doing it.
yeah, when you told me the cost that you were spending on rental space, we were like, yeah, can't do that. We got to find a different solution.
We have a plan this year, because we don't have enough covered space for you put a walk-in. So then we're going to put some money into a concrete slab and a covered space, hopefully this year, and then hopefully next year we'll have enough cash to do it.
So one thing you can do, so there's been a lot of chats or a lot of questions about freezer space, it sounds like. What we did before, I'm sorry, there's somebody here. I'm finally going to get electricity in this building, so I don't have to run a drop cord, which is going to be really nice, and especially when it comes to summer, because that means I can have AC. So I'm sorry if there's like drilling in the background. But we have rented, we did it 3 years in a row, even though we had the freezer space, we didn't have enough space for all of our other products. It was really hard. So we had a walk-in freezer, and we would rent from, it's called Triangle Ice around here, but it's one of those ice companies. And so it's a trailer, and you can rent it by the month. And so we would do that just for 2 months. We would rent it. I know Ben rented it 1 year as well, or a couple of years, but it's a freezer. So it's a deep freeze. So we were able to organize all of our turkeys in there. We just plugged it in, because we had, it requires, like a 220 plug. And so we would just plug it in, and we did that for several years. We did not do it last year because I forgot, and then they didn't have any available, but that just gives you that little bit of extra space. And it's not a lot of money. I think it costs like $300 total for the 2 or 3 months we have it. That just gets you through that Thanksgiving period. So if you, and you have to be very careful, because I know Ben has had this happen before. When you're freezing your birds, you can't pack them all in your chest freezer, because the ones in the center won't freeze properly. They do need to be laid out, because Ben gave me that really good advice one time, and I took it to heart. I've never had that.
I learned that early on. You got to have airflow.
Otherwise they don't freeze and they rot.
Oh, we've never had quite that issue, but we did find that we are okay. Now it's time to move them.
Yeah,
Moving, which is not fun. So.
Yeah. Right.
One thing about, I was just saying one thing about processing. One of the benefits of processing on farm is turkeys are a real pain to transport, and they're inefficient, and as you're catching them, you're going to bruise wings, you're going to bruise legs, and they're going to bruise you, because they're big and they're boisterous. So one thing that I do, and I learned this from another farmer in Appa, another reason to join Appa, What they do is they graze the birds so that, and they coordinate the grazing so that it ends at the processing barn. So now what I do is I do that and I coordinate it so it ends there, so they're close, and then I just set up, I use sheep panels, and I just walk them into the sheep panels, and then we can just grab them from there and kill them. It's so much calmer. They're not going to be bruised. You're not going to be bruised. And it is, I think that is, if you are processing on farm, I highly recommend that. And it really beats what I used to do, which is go out there with a trailer, catch them, throw them in the trailer, drive the trailer over. And it's so much better than that. And I highly recommend doing that if you can.
We do the same thing, Ben. They move away. They start close just because they're little, and then they move away, and then they circle back and they come back, and they end up the night before we're processing them right next to where we process. And we actually have just a dog cage, a dog pen, like an outdoor dog pen. So it's got shelter over it, and we can fit about 25 turkeys in there at a time, and we just sort of slowly move them in there, and we process that group, and they're tight and they're together, so it's easier to grab them.
We do the same. We rotate up to the processing area, and for turkeys, the night before processing, they're close to the processing area, but we'll move them into Suskovich tractors, about a dozen apiece.
They have
So,
wheels on them.
Yeah, and they have wheels on them, and then that's their.
We just open the door and one of us goes in there with feed because they're hungry, because they haven't been, we're doing the bow prep for them essentially. And you just walk right in, and 15 or 20 of them just follow you, and you shut the door. And then we just kind of slowly with the rope and the coop, because it has wheels on it, just walk them. And as long as you're not, we've messed up and done it a little too late in the evening, so the sun was going down, so they just stand there and they won't walk, but they walk with the coop, and we would just walk up the hill, which is about 100 feet or so, and then just do another batch and do another batch, versus catching every single one of them, because we've been there and done that, and that is not fun. Not fun.
Yeah, and so as the person that does take them to the processor, we do load them all in crates, and we have turkey crates that are from Premier One, and you can fit, depending on the size of the bird, a couple in a crate, and it is a ton of work, and they're very heavy crates, and it is not a fun loading process. We have managed to make it, as not stressful as possible, but it does take, it took 5 people when we did it this year with our 2 groups of 100, and I don't think anyone had bruises, but it's a hard task. Doesn't outweigh my desire to process on farm, but it is, and turkey crates are quite expensive. So that's the other downfall. And then from the turkey crates get loaded into a trailer that we drive.
So Katie, we're getting really short on time. I feel like we've already covered marketing. Is that okay? Do you want to just go straight to questions at this point?
Yeah, we don't have too many we've been answering well. I do have one regarding processing, and that's about for you home pluckers. What pluckers you're using, if you have any suggestions there.
The bigger, the better. I have a Featherman. They're big, or sorry, not Featherman. I have the Poultryman, the biggest model. I think it's a 35-inch. Turkeys are, I started off in their smaller model, and it's fine. But the thing about a turkey is that they are so big that you can't fit that many in the plucker at a time. So it really helps the process if you can do like 2 or 3. Even in the big plucker, I do like 2 or 3 regular size. If they're smaller, I can maybe do 4. If they're really big, 1 or 2. But it is tedious, and I cut off the feet first, because then they tumble around a lot better, and sometimes they have really sharp claws, and they'll scratch each other up in the plucker. I don't do that with a chicken or a duck. That's specifically for turkeys. And I always advise people when they're buying poultry equipment, if you're gonna make the plunge and buy real equipment, like once you're invested in it, you're not just dinking around starting stuff to try it out. Once you're really going for it, I always advise to buy the biggest model possible, because the cost difference between a small one and a big one, I guess once you already made that decision, like the cost proportionally to go with the bigger model isn't as big a bullet to bite as it is just to get into it in the first place. So I didn't follow that advice when I started, and I bought smaller stuff, and then I had to buy the bigger stuff later on, and I should have just bought the bigger stuff at the beginning.
Yeah, we've got a Featherman plucker. We bought the biggest of the Featherman models, and we've outgrown that. We just got grant funding for a much larger Scalder. So that'll be new this year, but still with turkeys, with the Featherman plucker that we have, we can do 2, and we also cut the feet off. We actually cut the feet off of all of our poultry. We'll let it tumble for like once or twice to try to start taking some of the skin off, but we very quickly cut the feet off so that they don't damage the skin, do any tears.
I think I probably have the same one that Ben has, plucker, and we cut off the head and the feet for turkeys, but not for chickens.
So we can move, if you guys want to speak to challenges, that'd be really great, and kind of maybe some for people getting started. We like we have a lot of people who are kind of just breaking into it. If you'd like to share some of the challenges and some of the advantages of raising turkeys over broilers, perhaps that'd be great.
Can I just say one thing really quickly? Somebody asked in the chat about brooders, talking about brooders. Ben is doing a webinar April 4th about brooders. And so, yeah, we're not really going to discuss brooders here just because Ben is going to do an in-depth presentation.
You can
And
come learn about all my mistakes over the years.
hearing about mistakes is just as valuable as hearing about good things that have happened.
I think so. I mean, if we're going to talk about challenges, I think that if we talk about challenges, we should also talk about the solutions that we've implemented for those challenges.
So Anna, Whitney, do you want to go first on
Oh,
challenge?
I was just gonna elaborate more on the freezer space. It seemed like every year we're buying another freezer, another freezer, another freezer, and eventually we're gonna dip into a walk-in freezer, but there's 2 challenges. We either just need to figure out a grant or something. It's just such a large amount of money. It's a big amount of money, but the other thing is we need to either save up a chunk of money and then just be ready at the drop of a dime for a used one. So that I think is our next challenge there.
You can
and-
always sell your chest freezers. Just try
That's
and
what
keep
we're
some of
that's
them.
what we're
That's what
banking
we're
on right
hoping to
now.
You know,
Like,
we timed it perfectly.
Yeah.
With COVID hit right the year after we got our freezer. And so everybody was looking for chest freezers. We had, I
Yeah.
think, about 11 or 12, and we
Yeah.
sold all but 2
yeah.
during
Yeah.
COVID because people couldn't get them. It was
Yeah.
perfect.
I think one of the things that we need to do and we are planning on doing is making small steps, so it's not such a big expense. We need to lay the concrete this year and get the lean-to cover the area where it will be, and then
Yeah.
once those are and we'll even have room underneath there if we want to get 1 or 2 more chest freezers until we want to start selling them. But having that infrastructure in place before actually buying the walk-in is our step for this year.
So
We
the
did
challenge
steps
of-
too. We
Yes,
did
and so the challenge of scheduling is a lot of it's based on the Thanksgiving freezer space. We can't process anything after mid-October. Because that's when we typically try to get all the Thanksgiving birds in, because like everyone said, we want to have our numbers on so we can, and talk about other challenges, satisfying your Thanksgiving customers with your weights is knowing your numbers and being confident with those numbers is really important, but we can't process anything after that because we have none. No
But
fridge
we're gonna change that challenge into an advantage this year with the help of Triangle Ice.
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna look into that.
Yeah,
then-
well, don't order it before I order mine because they
Right.
don't have enough for me.
and going into another challenge as far as Thanksgiving birds, especially we dabbled in it a little bit about just organization, the emailing, the spreadsheets, the double, triple checking. There's nothing else in the entire year that compares. And the more you do, the more and people cancel on you, and it can be very stressful. And there's nothing worse than like ruining a Thanksgiving bird for somebody. So you just don't, it's like a little fear.
And
You
it
don't do
doesn't matter how redundant you are and how many times in your posts or emails you have stated price per pound at, average total price per bird. 10 times you're going to have somebody close to the date that goes, wait, how much was that? I thought it was $25 total, not deposit. It's like, what planet are you from?
Yeah.
It happens though.
So I think that that logistics and the cash flow, because turkeys are a lot of cash flow, like, because yeah, those logistics are real. Which is I think why we all moved away from processing the week of Thanksgiving as well, is because there's already a full-time job just with logistics. And so then you add in raising and processing, it just gets really, really complicated. So do you guys have any solutions that you've implemented for the logistics?
I'd
Spreadsheet.
be interested. Yeah, I'd be interested in hearing, Anna, how do you deal with your logistics? I think getting them processed early so you know exactly what you have.
Mhm.
I do, I actually do a Google sheet. So everybody fills out a Google sheet so I know what range they want. I don't promise anybody an exact size. I promise them within a 2-pound range. And I actually deliver mine in bags that are we do insulated bags that actually have our logo on them, and people use them year round, and it's well worth the $5 per bag when you're selling a $150 turkey. And I put little labels on them, and so when we go to deliver, then everybody's got their own label. But double check spreadsheets. I do like spreadsheets though, so I'm not against spreadsheets. But I'm curious to hear what you do, Anna. And I know Ben, you do something totally different.
Yeah, so we definitely took a page out of your book, Sam. This year we did everything in insulated bags. We had them organized in the walk-in freezer with each person's name labeled on the bag, and lots of spreadsheets to show where the turkey was going. And we also did them by size range this year. So for the most part, people were just paying the full cost of the bird beforehand. With getting them processed at the processor we use, we did pay an extra charge with our second batch of turkeys to just have our processor box them all up. We've also used IBC totes to pick them up, but having them pre-boxed made our pickup situation way easier because turkeys are extremely cumbersome and they take a lot of room in a trailer to pick up. And so in addition to having to pick up the transport crates, our best option was to have them boxed. But the logistics for turkeys are a ton of work. I will say this year, for the first time, we moved to having an operating line of credit with our bank to help cash flow the turkeys versus just trying to cash flow them only with pre-orders or using other enterprises to cash flow them. And that for us has felt like a really good solution. So we still do get some deposits from people that help with that cash flow, but having the ability to not entirely just rely on pre-marketing our turkeys, I think for us allowed us to scale a little bit more and also eliminated a little bit of the stress that comes with just the upfront cost. So yeah, the logistics are challenging though, and not something that I think it's every year you figure something out a little bit different and hope to make it work. This was also our first year using a walk-in freezer, which was a big game changer. And we learned quickly though that our walk-in freezer was full of turkeys very quickly. And so yeah, it's an ongoing challenge. You solve one problem and then you realize that you need to solve another one.
And I think this is where it comes in. If you start smaller, you don't like all of a sudden say, hey, I'm going to get turkeys and get 500. You know, if you start to try it out with 50, try it out, then double it, and double it, then you can sort of slowly get your systems in place that you need to have in place in order to not screw stuff up. Because like Whitney said, you do not want to mess up somebody's Thanksgiving. That would just, they'll hate you forever.
But you probably will at some point. So it's
What'd you say, Hannah?
I was gonna say you probably will mess up someone's Thanksgiving at some point, and it's okay.
Yeah. It is okay, but you don't want to try it. You know, you want to do everything you can not to. Usually you can make it better somehow.
Yeah.
And that's why having the flexibility to have those extra birds that you're going to break up into parts, that gives you that extra flexibility to be like, oh, okay. You know, yeah, I didn't have a 15-pound bird. I sold all the 15-pounders. Sorry about that. You need a 20-pound bird. But if I've got those extras that I've got sort of out there, then I can usually fix most mistakes. It's rare that you can't fix it.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, Sam. Like, doesn't matter how many boxes you check. It doesn't matter how good your spreadsheets are. Like, you're gonna mess up, or a curveball is gonna get thrown your way. And you gotta have. That's another reason, like, I like to have extras, is so I can fix mistakes. And also, like, when you're distributing turkeys on Turkey Day, there will be people who walk up who want a turkey, and then you can say, "Yep, this is what I have." And that's really helpful too. And I think that you know, one of the things that I've done to help with the logistics and also help with the cash flow is I put my reservation form for turkeys online. And it's on JotForm is the form that I use. It is a subscription. There's a free model, but once you get to a certain scale, it's not robust enough, the free model. So I do a purchase model. Well worth it. And what it does is it captures the sale. It captures the reservation and the sale. And then it puts it into a spreadsheet for you. So there's no work for me on that end. It's all right there. I can just go into the JotForm admin site and click, you know, export to CSV, and then boom, I have it in a spreadsheet. It's wonderful. And I started this year, and I highly recommend it, is charge people up front for what they're going to buy, and like the entire cost. And so that eliminates the tracking deposits and then trying to figure out later how to get payment from them. Because that is a huge job, just figuring out how to get payment from people afterwards. So I just said, I made the reservation form in, like, when I buy the turkeys, basically, I make the reservation form because turkey poults are also expensive. And so I make the reservation form and I say, hey, I need to buy these turkeys and they're really expensive. Help me cash flow it. If you buy now, you get 10% off. And they're buying the entire cost of the turkey. So that can get me, you know, like $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, which helps to cash flow the entire turkey. And then all the turkeys. So that helps with the cash flow because people are paying up front. And that helps with the logistics because I'm not tracking down deposit to final payment. And then in my spreadsheet, when you're reserving, I'm only putting up the things that I know I'm going to have. So I only do, in the early days, before I have my dates, before I have my birds in the freezer and in good inventory, I only offer 14 to 16, 16 to 18, 18 to 20. Because I know I'm going to have those sizes and I know I'm going to have a lot of them. And then if people want a bigger one or a smaller one, I say, okay, hey, check back in like mid-October, late October, and I'll have all my weights and I'll put them on this form. And you can go in there and you can update your form for what you want. And then I can go in and cancel the other ones. And I think that, like, having one system that captures payments, that organizes your reservations, is just the most revolutionary thing that I've done in my turkey days. And eliminating the deposit and forcing people to pay upfront. And then also, like Whitney and Isaiah said, like, people show up and they're like, oh, I thought it was a $30 deposit. I thought that was the whole thing for the turkey. And so by doing that, you force people to pay the entire cost of the turkey. Like, if they get sticker shock, they just walk away and they don't do it. And then the other thing, it's online. The form is online. And so people just will find me online and order. So I don't have to just be there physically to fill out the form with them. They just go online and find me, and I get so many sales from people I don't know where they come from, but they just order on there. And then I have multiple pickup spots, and I put the pickup spots on the form so people can just go on and choose where they want to pick up. And then when I export it onto a spreadsheet, it's all there, and I know how many turkeys go here, how many turkeys go there, and it's all clean and simple.
So Ben,
And then there's always the people who throw things off.
So Ben, I have a question for you. So what do you do when people get towards Thanksgiving or something happens and they have to cancel their Thanksgiving and they want it's a lot easier to give back $20 deposit than it is to give back $150 for a whole bird. Does that happen often?
Theoretically, there's no give backs. And I tell people that up front, no give backs. But realistically, I give back. I just go in. So it's easy because the Jot form is actually hooked up to a Square account. I don't use Square for anything else. I use Clover for a point of sale software, everything else, or at least retail, everything else. But I use Square for the Jot form because that's what syncs with Jot form. And then I just go into my Square account and I hit refund. And it doesn't matter if it was 4 months ago, it's still in there. I just hit refund and it's done. But you don't get a whole lot of those. And theoretically, I could be mean and say sorry because that turkey's already sold, right? Like you're holding that turkey for them. You've already done so much work for them. They don't see it that way. But I'm like, I already spent a bunch of time with you. Like putting this in the spreadsheet, thinking about you, emailing you. And it's always the people who need a lot of special attention who are the ones who cancel. It's like, okay, I've already spent an hour on the phone with you and I spent 20 minutes emailing you and now you're going to cancel? Like, no, you don't get the money back. But I also tend to be nice and give people the money back. I don't think I've ever, even though I say, like, even when I did a deposit and I said no give backs, no cancellations, I think I still give people the money back.
Okay, it looks like Katie, we need to come to the end of this. I think we can talk forever and ever, but I told you guys it was going to take an hour, and now we're at an hour an hour and 14 minutes. But there's a couple of questions about what hatcheries we use, and I use Custom Ink for my bags. Anna, who did you use for your bags? Those are a couple of questions. And Katie, if there's anything I've missed that you think we need to add before we finish.
I use 4 Imprint for my bags.
Okay, and I'm also going to ask everybody to please do this end of webinar poll. I really appreciate it. It really helps us with funding and all that other kind of good stuff. And hatcheries, do you guys want to quickly go over hatcheries and then we'll call it a day? Does that sound good?
That was going to be my last one. Yeah, that was going to be my last one. Thank you.
We use Town Line Hatchery for just turkeys is where we get them. I don't know where they're out of. I could look.
They're Michigan, aren't they? I think Town Line.
I don't know. I could look it up. I'm not. Too many details. I can't keep care of all the details.
I use Mount Healthy in Ohio. I've also heard good things about Valley of the Moon. I think they're in West Virginia. I would say if you're in driving distance to a hatchery, go get your turkeys. It's going to make such a big difference than shipping them. I know a farm in Florida that drives all the way up to Ohio to get their turkeys every year because it's that big a deal. It really makes a huge difference if you can pick them up directly. So if you have access to that, don't even worry about which hatchery it is. They all have the same genetics if you're doing broad-breasteds, and then go there and get them directly.
I use Valley of the Moon as well.
We use Valley of the Moon as well.
They're good quality birds.
Yeah.
All right. So if everyone could do the end of the webinar poll, that would be fantastic. So I have a couple of quick announcements. We'll be continuing our poultry journey next week. In April with Ben with brooding. How I can't remember what we've called it. It's better brooding. When Ben and I were talking about what to call it, Ben was just like how to brood birds without killing them. So I think it's some nicer way of saying how to brood birds without killing them. So that's what that one is. Next week we've got how soil health and plant diversity influences animal and human health. If you're registered for the, because the Brooder webinar actually had to get postponed because Ben had a family emergency. So if you have already registered for that, that registration still works. And but if you want to be doubly sure, you can go ahead and re-register for it. So a sincere thank you to our panelists. I said at the very beginning when we first started this, like how excited I was to get this group of people together, and I'm not kidding. This is an absolutely amazing group of people, and I love each and every one of you. You are all fantastic turkey people and other people other than turkey people too. And
We love you too, Sam.
thank you, Ben. So a few housekeeping items before we sign off. A recording of this webinar and the slides will be available within the next few days. These documents will be archived on our website, and I will email them to you as well. Check out the good webinars we've got coming up this spring. They should be on your screen right now. And a sincere thank you to Katie for jumping in right at the last minute because I was going to be on the panel because I have stuff to say about turkeys, but I wanted to be able to say it without interrupting everybody. So thank you, Katie. I know I put you on the spot there, and I really appreciate you jumping in and being a wonderful coworker. Anyway, so that's absolutely all I have to say, and thank you to everybody who hung in there. We ended up going quite a long while, so thank you everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.